mutual aid organization. I don't like to call us a charity because that's not really what we do. Charity makes me think of the old model of just giving people things and then that's the end of the relationship. So we contact people on the streets. We deliver items to the streets. We're constantly crowdfunding, whether it be tents, sleeping bags, solar phone chargers. We try to provide items that people can't get from other places, like other organizations, so we try to avoid duplication of services. So what we offer is a range of services that not a lot of places even have access to. So we do make direct communications with encampments. We currently serve Phoenixville, Pottstown, Norristown, and Philly. So we do outreaches in all of those places. Philly around once a month, Pottstown usually twice a month, sometimes more, Norristown at least once a month, and we partner with Ansar who supplies hot food. So usually our mission for an outreach is to provide three things, and it's a meal for now, food for later, and items to help you survive and make your life a little easier. So that's why we focus on camping items, because I noticed that a lot of people, there's a little bit of a negative vibe around a lot of organizations that deal with housing, and that's because the current situation is very bleak. Inflation is through the roof. The cost of housing has gone up, I think, 200% the past 5 years, and the minimum wage stays the same. And wages overall, they're not going up the way they should be to match this inflation. And the inflation is mostly generated by greedy landlords, by greedy property owners, by greed in general. I mean, to me, this is the example of what late stage capitalism is private companies buying up all the housing and then squeezing people until they can't afford it. And that's what a lot of companies like Zillow have attempted to recently do. I think the company's Blackwater, who's currently buying up private homes and then flipping them for next to nothing and then selling them. So just in our short time as a nonprofit, we've noticed a huge increase in requests for items. And the most problematic thing is I've noticed a huge increase of people sleeping in their cars, which is something that before it was either you were on the streets or you were in shelter, and there wasn't a whole lot of people sleeping in cars. And that's something that started to happen in California and on the West Coast a couple of years ago, and it has only gotten worse. So that's something we really need to be cognizant about as a group of organizations that are trying to battle this. So a little bit about myself, and then you'll kind of understand why I do the things that I do. I was raised pretty poor. My family didn't have an awful lot. We moved around a lot. We lived in trailer parks. We were on food stamps. And we didn't really start to see a change in our lives until we moved to Phoenixville in 1990, and that's when things started to get a little better. My father was able to get better employment and all that, but I was still never able to go to college. I'm a self-taught computer programmer. So in my time, I got started with my activism by trying to go down that path and try to teach people how to, especially teenagers, how to do computer programming. Because if they get a taste for it, then they can turn it into a career, and it's honestly a very lucrative career. And you can also use it for activism, for helping change the world by offering free software and things like that. But to me, it just wasn't enough, and I felt like all I was doing was talking. So I told my wife, I said, I'm going to try to start a homeless outreach organization. And my first experience with homeless outreach was actually with my brother's ex-wife's family. We used to go down to Philly and hand out blankets. And I'll never forget the looks on people's faces when you would walk up to them. It was snow. The one day it was very vivid. It was like snowing and just terrible. And there were people sleeping on grates. And I was like, nobody should ever have to live their life like this. This is unacceptable. In the richest country in the world, that we basically, if you can't grip capitalism, and if you can't survive capitalism, then you get thrown away because you're viewed as a non-creator, you're non-profitable, so therefore your life is meaningless. And it wasn't always like this. It hasn't always been like this, but it keeps getting worse and worse. So I actually was going to start my own group, and a friend told me that You Are Worth It was just starting to do this, just handing out bags and simple things in Kensington and Center City. We started getting involved with that, and immediately I started looking around here as well for people that are living in parking lots, people that are living in the woods. Started making trips out of it, and going looking for any sort of encampments, and I learned a lot in that time. So they decided they were going to form a food bank in Spring City, which serves a very important purpose. But I wanted to keep doing the homeless outreach because I feel like it fills a very important void in the services that are available in this entire area. Because there are a lot of brick and mortar places like this that provide amazing services, but a lot of people don't have cars, they don't have transportation, they don't, some people live in towns where they don't have as many services. It's all based on where you live and what you have access to. And that being said, Phoenixville does it better than anybody. I mean, Phoenixville has the lowest level of homelessness that I've seen in any town around here. Pottstown is absolutely horrible. We service one encampment in Pottstown that has anywhere from 25 to 35 people on a regular basis. We're actually going to be taking all the bags that we pack today and distributing them there. There's people that live in the encampments, there's people that live behind buildings, there's people that live in the doorways of buildings, there's people that live under train tracks. We recently helped a man that lived in Lansdale, and he was living under a train platform. It pretty much carved out a whole little house for himself there. And just think to yourself, just imagine trying to sleep when there's active trains going by you every half hour. And he probably stays there because it's safe. And safety is something that we take for granted because we have safety in our houses. People out there, they don't have safety and they don't trust a lot of people. So our main thing is establishing trust, establishing communication, because then it opens them up to being able to get other services, as our main goal is always housing. So our short-term goals are to provide people with items and to provide people with a little bit of hope to keep going. And then we are like a liaison to the other services. So I'll just go really quick through that. I kind of went through all this already. Our current state is encampment and street outreach. We provide tent sleeping bags, solar food chargers. We have partnerships with Dan's Heart and Tax for Food. So we get food and we distribute it all around the area. Building relationships, and one other thing that we're starting to try to do as a part of our mutual aid stuff is to provide cleanups, because the more of a mess your encampment is, the more you're going to be harassed by the neighbors and the police. And if you think about it, where are they supposed to put their trash if they don't have trash pickup? It's kind of a self-defeating cycle that in homelessness in and of itself is a self-perpetuating cycle, because it's almost, the system is built to make you homeless if you don't comply with the standards of the system, and then it's designed to keep you there, because homelessness is effectively illegal. You're not allowed to stay in public parks. You're not allowed to sleep anywhere on private property. You'll get the cops called on you. How is that not illegal? It's illegal to be homeless in America. And once you're out there, that's when you start getting harassed by cops. That's when you start having health problems. That's where any mental health problems you have may be exacerbated. And most importantly, people are always like, well, why can't they just get a job? Well, how is someone supposed to get a job when they haven't had a shower in 2-3 weeks? How are they supposed to keep a job when they can't keep their clothes clean? Their phones are always dying. They don't have effective alarms. All these things start to stack up to just make it almost like quicksand that they can't escape. And it also exacerbates addiction problems and mental health problems at the same time. And in a lot of places like Pottstown and like Phoenixville 10-15 years ago, a lot of these services didn't exist for people like that to be able to get the types of services that the rest of us take for granted through our public, our private health, and our mental health care providers. So essentially, people in the lower classes have been getting shafted really bad, and they continually get shafted, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to provide kind of like a buffer between the people on the streets and the people in society as well. Because one of the biggest things that we like to do is to be vocal advocates for the people out there, because if you don't work on some of the stigmas that surround homelessness and drug addiction and mental health, then we're not going to have any societal progress. I suffer from addiction. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I drank probably half my life to basically cover up for a lot of the traumas I experienced as a kid. And a lot of people, if they don't have support systems like the ones that I had, then they end up on the streets, and they end up in all sorts of problems and they end up in Kensington. And Kensington is just a graveyard of lost safety nets, so to speak. They're people that are just not valued by society. And they're still human beings, and that's the most important part about what we do and what other organizations like Ansart and all these organizations do, is putting a human behind those faces you see. They're not just somebody that's dirty and can't afford their food, or they're trying to scam people. Our biggest thing is never judge. Never judge and never make assumptions about people. I don't ask questions. If I go to help someone, it's just, this is yours. There's no strings attached, and I'm doing it because I want to help you. And I will do anything to help you get out of the situation. And I feel like with that mentality, that we fill a nice void between the streets and the other services. So our future state, I'll try to keep this short as possible, is a fixed home base. We don't really need a shop front per se, but we need a place to store all our donations. As you can see, after a while, it starts to get starts to take up a little bit of space, especially with the numbers of stuff that we're running through. We've been giving out probably 25 to 30 tents a month at least. Multiple chapters. I'd like to open multiple chapters across the state. We already have some, a chapter in Boyertown. We have someone in Westchester that we've been providing items to. And aside from networking with all the great Phoenixville organizations, we also network with organizations all over. That includes Philly, that includes Pottstown. We work with groups from the Salvation Army to Lyft, to who runs the St. Al's Running Shelter, to Leanne's Life Changing Ferries, who's just a small group just like ours, the people that go out and help people. And we want to focus on housing first. So people cannot feasibly get their life together unless they have an opportunity to get their life straight, and that includes they have to be housed. And that's where everything starts, because once someone's housed, you can get them mental health care. You can get them addiction health care if they need it. You can get them all the help that they need, and they'll be stable. They'll be able to take a shower. They'll be able to make their dinner in a shared location. They'll be able to have safety. Safety is the number one thing, and that's honestly the problem with a lot of shelters. Is people do not feel safe in shelters. There's a reason why a lot of people choose to not want to stay in a shelter, because they've had really bad experiences sometimes, and it's undeniable. I've heard that story over and over again. So housing is number one, and that we have to be a little innovative. We have to think outside of the box. One of our ideas is warehouse villages or tiny house villages. So whether that would be around Phoenixville or in Spring City, Roarsford, Pottstown, we're not really sure yet, but we're looking for collaborators to kind of come up with something like that. So tiny house village that would basically be just small efficiencies with a bathroom and a couple of shared facilities. Bathroom would include a shower, and it would be on ground at probably a couple of acres, and the houses would be placed apart. And we would also have services like transportation services if need be, to get to possible employment or services that they need to get to. So we're fairly new in the whole process as an organization, and we're still focusing on our short-term goals, because I feel like what we're doing right now is extremely important. We will continue to do this even after we start offering further services, but we're planning for the future now, and I don't think it's ever too early to plan for the future. And the housing situation is only going to get worse. I mean, how can it get better? If I just saw a 400 square foot apartment for $1,200. Are you kidding me? That's barely enough room to even live. And these greedy landlords are just constantly upping it because they can. That's the only reason. So multiple chapters, multiple vehicles. I'd like to be able to assign people to go and volunteers to be able to go and take care of things all over the place, because one of our most important services is the mobile call. Like, not only do we go to encampments, but we also, whenever we're notified about somebody on the streets or in a parking lot or whatever, I'll pack up the car and head there and establish contact is the most important thing. Give them a couple of things and then give them my number so that they can request further items, and I can also try to get them into the system, into 2-on-1, and into some sort of further help. And knowing all the organizations in that town definitely helps out there. And like I said, the community services that we want to offer are trash pickups. We're currently working on that now. Also working with the, you'll happen to notice if you're in this work that a lot of people live on railroad property. So we've been in contact with the railroad in Pottstown to make sure that we're allowed to do a cleanup. We're going to probably be doing that in about 2 or 3 weeks in Pottstown. Some of these other things are actually duplicate services, so we're not going to be moving ahead with those. Supply metrics for the things that we've done this winter. We did at least 75 hotel rooms since I started tracking this. Most of them were in Pottstown. Phoenixville has a much better system of getting people into shelters and code blues, and there's just less people. But during the really bad cold snap in February, we just were getting bombarded with calls for people that needed to be in hotel rooms because the warming shelter was full. So we did 75 hotel rooms, which definitely turned out to be pricey. Thanks to Ann's Heart and other places, we've done 1,750 hot meals. It's usually about 200 to 300 people per Philly trip that we serve in Center City, around Love Park. This year so far, we've done 225 tents, and our goal this summer is to distribute 500 tents and 500 sleeping bags, which I'm sure is going to aggravate a lot of people that live around these areas. But honestly, I don't really care, because to me, the people have to stay somewhere. They can't. Where are they supposed to go? So with that in mind, I'm going to try to make them more comfortable if I can, because sleeping under a bridge or sleeping without any sort of shelter at all just really doesn't sound that fun, and it's not, because when I was younger, I spent a few nights outside. It wasn't a lot of fun. I spent probably a total of 2 or 3 weeks when I had been kicked out of my house, staying outside, staying in cars, and it was terrible. So just with that limited experience, I can't imagine how people do it all the time and how some people manage to really keep their spirits up. But it's really amazing to me. So I would say we serve at least 1,250 clients, and that is probably an underestimation. Sometimes it's hard to keep track, especially when we'll serve 40 to 50 people in Pottstown some days, and sometimes as many as 350 in Philly. So this is basically a map of all the areas we cover and about the average of the number of people that we see per trip. Norristown, there's people living along the train tracks, there's people living in the transportation center building. They're always getting harassed by pretty much everybody. And it's just not a very good time for a lot of the people out there. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is the fact that I'm a software developer, and I'm actively building an application to make the lives easier for nonprofits. So I'm building something called Simple Orgs, and it's going to be a client management system, a project management system, social media for nonprofits. It's going to have messaging. You'll be able to message your board. You'll be able to message your donors. You'll be able to create groups of certain donors that are assigned to certain projects. And most importantly, it's going to have email campaign management and all sorts of other features that a lot of nonprofits don't have the money for. So I'm kind of building it around what we do, because I know that a lot of nonprofits are going to need some sort of client management system. So I'm building it around that, tracking our client needs, tracking the project tasks and associating those together, and also doing things like, if you have inventory and you have a need come in, bumping the two together to see if you have inventory that matches a certain need, and then you'll get a notification saying, we already have that. So automation of tasks to save people time, to save volunteers time, to save executive directors time, and also things for tracking expenses to make tax time a little bit easier. So all told, that's pretty much what we're doing as an organization. This is going to be being done under Better Days Ahead as well, because it involves the work that we do. I've done websites for 5 or 6 of the organizations in this area, Project Sano, Common Ground Volunteers, and so doing these websites kind of help me understand the needs of other nonprofits. So I'm starting to roll that all into a reusable software package. So with that being said, does anybody have any questions about anything we do? Or